My daughter gave me a pair of wireless earbuds for my 72nd birthday. I thought it was a gesture of love. My coworker, a former military communications specialist, took one look at them and went pale. He whispered that I needed to call the FBI. I did not react. I kept my cool and walked away. But 3 days later, I stood in the pouring rain and watched my only child get handcuffed and shoved into the back of a police cruiser. She was screaming my name, begging for help, but I did not look back. Sometimes, you have to let the people you love fall, just so they can learn how to stand. But before I tell you how I brought down a multi-million-dollar cargo theft ring from my kitchen table, let me know where you are listening from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to make a heartbreaking choice to protect your family's honor. My name is Darius King. I have spent 40 years working logistics at the Port of Baltimore. I know how to spot a fake bill of lading from a mile away. I know when a container weighs 5 pounds lighter than the manifest says it should. But I never thought I would have to use those skills to investigate my own flesh and blood. It started last Tuesday, my 72nd birthday. The air in my dining room was thick enough to choke on. It was supposed to be a celebration, but it felt more like a wake. My daughter Tiana sat across from me. She is 35 years old, beautiful, smart, but lately she looks like a ghost of the girl I raised. Her eyes were darting around the room, never settling on mine for more than a second. Beside her sat her husband, Braden. Braden is the kind of man who wears a suit that costs more than my car, but he never seems to have enough cash to pay for dinner. He calls himself an investment strategist. I call him a shark in shallow water. He was tapping his foot under the table. Tap, tap, tap. A nervous rhythm that grated on my nerves. He kept checking his expensive watch, pulling back his cuff every 2 minutes, as if he had somewhere better to be. "Happy birthday, Dad," Tiana said. Her voice was too high, too bright. She pushed a small, perfectly wrapped box across the oak table. The wrapping paper was silver, tied with a blue ribbon. It looked expensive. Too expensive for a couple who just asked me to co-sign a loan last month. I looked at the box, then at Tiana. I wanted to see love in her eyes. I desperately wanted to see the little girl who used to sit on my lap and ask me to tell her stories about the ships coming in from across the ocean. But all I saw was anxiety. She was sweating. A tiny bead of perspiration ran down her temple, even though the air conditioning was on full blast. "Open it," Braden urged. His voice was smooth, like oil on water. "We picked it out specially for you, Darius. We know how lonely those night shifts at the port can get." I unwrapped the paper slowly. I have never been a man who rushes. Inside was a sleek black box. I opened the lid. Nestled in the foam were 2 high-tech wireless earbuds. The brand was obscure, something I had never heard of, but they looked futuristic. There was a small blue light, pulsing softly on the side of the charging case. "Earbuds," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "I am an old man, Tiana. I still listen to my jazz on the cassette player in the garage." "That is why you need them, Dad," Tiana said, leaning forward. Her hands were gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. "You can connect them to your phone. You can listen to music, audiobooks, podcasts while you inspect the cargo. It will make the time pass faster. Please, Dad, just try them." She was pushing too hard. In my line of work, when someone pushes a shipment through customs too fast, it usually means there is something illegal inside. But she was my daughter. I did not want to ruin the night. I took the case out of the box. The plastic felt cold and heavy in my hand. Braden immediately pulled out his phone. "Let me help you set them up, Darius," he said. He did not wait for my permission. He reached over and grabbed my old smartphone from the table. I watched him. His fingers moved with lightning speed. He was not just pairing a device. He was digging into settings, scrolling through menus. "What are you doing, Braden?" I asked. My voice dropped an octave. It was the voice I used when a truck driver gave me attitude at the loading dock. "Just optimizing the sound quality for you," he said without looking up. "There, all done." He handed the phone back to me. The earbuds were already in my ears. The sound was crystal clear, too clear. I could hear the ambient noise of the room amplified slightly, like a hearing aid. Tiana smiled, but it looked painful. "Do you like them, Dad? Promise me you will wear them tonight at work. Promise me." "Why tonight?" I asked. "Just so I know you are enjoying my gift," she stammered. And then I saw it. It was quick. If I had blinked, I would have missed it. Braden looked at Tiana. He gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. And then he winked. It was not a playful wink. It was the kind of signal a con man gives his partner when the mark has swallowed the bait. A cold shiver went down my spine. It felt like ice water replacing the blood in my veins. I have survived riots, labor strikes, and dangerous machinery accidents. My gut instinct has kept me alive for 72 years. And right now, my gut was screaming at me. This was not a gift. This was a Trojan horse. I forced a smile onto my face. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. "Thank you," I said. "I will wear them tonight, I promise." Braden let out a breath he had been holding. He clapped his hands together. "Great. Well, we should get going. Big day tomorrow. Markets open early." They left 5 minutes later. They did not stay for cake. They did not ask how I was feeling. As their luxury car peeled out of my driveway, leaving me alone in the silence of my empty house, I looked down at the earbuds in my hand. The little blue light was still pulsing. Blink, blink, blink. Like a heartbeat, or like a countdown. I did not know what they were planning. I did not know how deep the rot went. But I knew one thing. My daughter had just invited the devil into my life, and she expected me to be too old and too stupid to notice. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of whiskey. I drank it neat. Then I picked up the phone, but I did not call the police. Not yet. I called the one man who knew more about surveillance technology than the CIA. "Hutch," I said when he picked up. "I need you to meet me at the warehouse an hour early. Bring your scanner." "Why?" Hutch asked, his voice groggy with sleep. "Because I think my family just declared war on me," I said, "and I intend to win." I grabbed my keys and headed out into the night. The earbuds were in my pocket, burning a hole through the fabric. I did not know it then, but that drive to the port would be the last peaceful drive of my life. By the time the sun came up, everything I knew about loyalty would be dead, and the man I used to be, the gentle father, the forgiving old man, would be dead along with it. What I was about to discover would make me wish I had stayed ignorant. But in the world of logistics, ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance is just a lost shipment, and I was not about to lose this one. The port of Baltimore at night is a beast that never sleeps. It is a world of steel shadows and sodium vapor lights, smelling of diesel fuel, salt water, and cold iron. For 40 years, this has been my kingdom. I know the rhythm of the cranes like I know the beat of my own heart. I know which containers hold cheap plastic toys from China and which ones are loaded with high-end electronics, just by the way the suspension on the truck settles. I walked into the security booth at 10 o'clock sharp. The wind was whipping off the Patapsco River, cutting through my jacket, but I felt a strange warmth in my chest. I reached up and tapped the left earbud. The smooth plastic felt alien against my weathered skin, but the sound of soft jazz filled my head, drowning out the grinding gears of the forklifts outside. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe the fantasy. My daughter loved me. She wanted me to have nice things. She wanted her old man to be happy. Hutch was already there, hunched over a circuit board with a magnifying glass screwed into his eye. Hutch is a man who speaks the language of machines better than he speaks to people. He did 2 tours in Afghanistan as a communications sergeant. He can strip a radio blindfolded and tell you if a cell phone is secure just by listening to the static. "Hey, Hutch," I said, stepping inside and closing the heavy steel door against the wind. I tapped my ear again, a little show of pride. "Check out the new gear. Birthday present from my baby girl." Hutch looked up, his one good eye narrowing. He didn't smile. Hutch rarely smiles. He put down his soldering iron and wiped his grease-stained hands on a rag. "Fancy," he grunted. "Let me see." I took the earbuds out and placed them in his open palm. They looked small and fragile in his calloused hand. I expected him to make a joke about me trying to look like a teenager. I expected him to ask if I was listening to rap music, but he didn't laugh. He picked up the left earbud and held it up to the overhead light. He squinted. Then he pulled the magnifying glass down over his eye again. The silence in the booth stretched out. It was heavy, uncomfortable. The jazz music was still playing tinny and faint from the earbud in his hand. "Turn off the music, Darius," Hutch said. His voice was flat, serious. I fumbled with my phone and paused the track. "Why? What is it?" Hutch didn't answer. He reached into his tool drawer and pulled out a small black device with an antenna, a frequency scanner. I had seen him use it 100 times to check for interference on our walkie-talkie channels. He flipped the switch. The device hissed with white noise. He held the earbud next to the antenna. Immediately, the scanner screamed. A high-pitched, rhythmic chirping sound cut through the air. It was aggressive, relentless. My stomach dropped. I did not need to be a tech genius to know what that sound meant. That was a transmission signal. "But the music is off," I said, my voice sounding weak in my own ears. "I am not on a call. Why is it making that noise?" Hutch set the earbud down in the desk as if it were a venomous spider. He looked at me, and his face was pale. Not the pale of fear, but the pale of disgust. "Darius, come look at this." I leaned in. He pointed to a tiny microscopic dot right next to the blue LED light. It was so small, I would have mistaken it for a speck of dust. "That is not factory," Hutch whispered. "See the jagged edge? Someone drilled this, manually. It is a bypass." "A bypass for what?" I asked, though deep down, the cold realization was already spreading through my veins like poison. Hutch looked me dead in the eye. "This is not a microphone for making phone calls, Darius. This is an omnidirectional receiver. It is wired to bypass the phone's operating system. It does not just turn on when you make a call. It is on right now. It is always on. It is streaming everything you hear, everything you say, and everything happening in this room directly to a private server." He picked up the scanner again. The chirping sound continued. "Data," Hutch said. "High-density audio data. Someone is listening to us right now. Someone is recording the shift change. Someone wants to know the security codes we say out loud." I took a step back. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. The image of Tiana's face at the dinner table flashed in my mind. Her sweat, her shaking hands, Braden's wink. "Promise me you will wear them tonight at work." They didn't give me a gift. They put a leash on me. Hutch stood up and walked over to the window, closing the blinds. He turned to me, his voice low and urgent. "Mr. King, this is not a birthday present. This is a bug, a military-grade bug disguised as a consumer toy. Whoever gave you this is not trying to help you listen to music. They are turning you into a walking, talking surveillance drone. You are a mule, Darius. A mule for information." I stared at the black plastic bud on the desk. It looked innocent. It looked sleek. But now I saw it for what it was. It was a knife in my back. And the hand holding the handle belonged to the person I loved most in this world. I sank into the office chair, the weight of 72 years crashing down on my shoulders. I wanted to smash the earbuds with a hammer. I wanted to scream, but I did neither. I sat there, listening to the high-pitched scream of the scanner, the sound of my daughter's betrayal filling the room. "They want the cargo schedules," I whispered, more to myself than to Hutch. "Braden, he is in debt. He wants to know what comes in and when." Hutch reached for the phone. "We have to call the Port Authority police, Darius. Right now. This is a federal offense." I reached out and grabbed his wrist. My grip was iron, the grip of a man who has moved steel crates by hand. "No," I said. Hutch looked at me like I was crazy. "Darius, they are using you. Give me 3 days," I said. My voice was steady, even though my heart was breaking into a million pieces. 3 days for what? "To find out if my daughter is the devil," I said, staring at the blinking blue light. "Or if she is just in hell. And if she is the devil, Hutch, then I need to be the one to cast her out." Hutch looked at my hand on his wrist, then up at my face. He saw something in my eyes that made him put the phone down. He saw the soldier I never was, waking up for a war I never wanted to fight. "Okay, D," Hutch said softly. 3 days. But we are not just going to let them listen." He sat back down at his desk and cracked his knuckles. "If they want a show, let's give them a show." I looked at the earbuds. I picked one up and put it back in my ear. The jazz music had stopped, but I could hear the faint static hiss of the connection. I imagined Braden sitting in his home office, headphones on, waiting for me to spill a secret. I took a deep breath. "Hey, Hutch," I said loudly, speaking directly to the invisible listener. "Looks like it is going to be a quiet night. I heard the big shipment of processors got delayed until next week." I looked at Hutch. He nodded. The game had begun, and I was about to teach my children a lesson they would never forget. Never underestimate the man who taught you how to walk, because he is also the only one who knows how to make you fall. The silence that followed Hutch's declaration was heavier than any shipping container I had ever moved. It pressed against my eardrums, drowning out the distant hum of the port cranes and the rhythmic lapping of the dark water against the pier. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. My lungs felt paralyzed, not by fear, but by a grief so sharp and sudden it felt like a physical blow to the chest. I sat down slowly on the swivel chair. The springs squeaked, a lonely sound in the small, fluorescent-lit booth. I looked at the earbuds lying on the desk. They looked so innocent, just two small pieces of black plastic and silicone. But now I saw them for what they truly were. They were not a gift. They were handcuffs. They were a weapon aimed at the heart of the very place that had put food on my family's table for 4 decades. Hutch was still holding the scanner, his one good eye fixed on me with a mixture of pity and professional alarm. He didn't speak. He knew better than to interrupt a man who was watching his entire world crumble. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the calculation of it, the sheer, cold-blooded logic. My mind, trained by years of managing complex logistics and spotting discrepancies in manifests, began to connect the dots with terrifying speed. The pieces of the puzzle slammed into place, and the picture they formed was ugly. I remembered a conversation from Thanksgiving dinner 6 months ago. Braden had been drinking too much scotch. He had cornered me in the living room, rambling about cryptocurrency and leverage trading. He talked about a sure thing, a market shift that was going to make him millions. I remembered the sweat on his upper lip even then. I remembered the way his leg bounced nervously. I had dismissed it as the ramblings of a greedy man, but now I knew. He hadn't just lost money, he had lost everything. And in the world of high-stakes gambling, when you lose money you don't have, you don't just get a call from the bank. You get a visit from people who break legs. They didn't want my retirement savings. That was too small. They wanted the port. I looked out the window at the rows of stacked containers towering into the night sky. To the average person, they are just metal boxes, but to thieves, they are treasure chests. We had a shipment of high-grade microchips coming in next week from Taiwan. 3 containers, street value of nearly $12 million. Braden knew about the chips. I had mentioned the increased security protocols at Sunday dinner a month ago. I thought I was just making conversation with my family. I thought I was talking to my daughter and her husband. I didn't know I was briefing the enemy. They needed the location. They needed the gate codes. And most importantly, they needed to know when the security shift changes happened, so they could slip a truck in and out without being logged. That was why they needed the earbuds. They didn't just want to hear my voice. They wanted to hear the ambient noise of the office. They wanted to hear Hutch calling out the container numbers. They wanted to hear the radio chatter from the patrol cars. And Tiana. My heart clenched so hard I thought I was having a heart attack. My little girl. The girl I taught to ride a bike in the parking lot of this very warehouse. Had she sat there, wrapping this box in silver paper, knowing what was inside? Had she tied that blue ribbon with hands that knew they were tying a noose around her father's neck? Or was she just a pawn? Was she so beaten down by that man, so manipulated by his debts and his lies, that she did not see the cliff she was driving off? Hutch cleared his throat. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. He reached for the red phone on the wall. That was the direct line to the Port Authority Police and the FBI field office. "We have to call it in, Darius," Hutch said, his voice grim. "This is federal espionage. Tampering with port security is a felony. If those things are transmitting data to a server, we are compromised. Every second we wait is a risk." I watched his hand move toward the receiver. I knew he was right. I knew that as a security consultant, my duty was to the port. My duty was to the law. But as his hand touched the cold plastic of the phone, another instinct took over, a primal, irrational instinct that defied all logic. "Don't," I said. My voice was low, a rumble deep in my throat. Hutch froze. He looked back at me, his eyebrows raised. "Darius, listen to me. This isn't a parking ticket. This is prison time. If Braden is selling data to cargo theft rings, these are dangerous people. You cannot protect her from this." I stood up. My knees popped, but I felt a surge of cold energy returning to my limbs. I walked over to Hutch and placed my hand over his on the phone. My hand was trembling, just slightly, but my grip was firm. "She is my daughter, Hutch." I wiped her tears when she fell off the swing set. I walked her down the aisle. "If I make this call now, the FBI kicks down her door in an hour. They drag her out in her pajamas. They ruin her life before I even know the truth. She ruined her own life, Darius, Hutch argued, though he didn't lift the receiver. She bugged you. She betrayed you. Maybe, I said, staring at the blinking blue light of the earbuds on the desk. Or maybe she is scared. Maybe she is in danger. I need to know if she is the architect of this nightmare, or if she is just another victim of that man she married. Hutch pulled his hand back and crossed his arms over his chest. He was frustrated. He was a soldier, and soldiers deal in black and white, friend or foe, target or ally. But he was also my friend. He had seen the picture of Tiana on my desk every day for 5 years. You are playing a dangerous game, Dee, he warned. If the shipment gets hit while we are dicking around, it is on us. We go to jail too. You get that, right? Accomplices. I am not asking for a month, I said, looking him dead in the eye. I am asking for 3 days, 72 hours. 3 days to do what? To test her, I said. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. I need to know who she really is. I need to feed them bait and see if they bite. I need to see if she warns me, or if she leads the wolves right to my door. Hutch stared at me for a long time. The scanner on the desk was still hissing and chirping, a constant reminder that we were being watched, being heard. Finally, he let out a long, ragged sigh. He shook his head. 3 days, he muttered. But we do it my way. We control the feed. If I smell even a whiff that they are moving on a shipment before then, I make the call, with or without you. Deal, I said. Hutch sat back down at his computer. His fingers began to fly across the keyboard. He wasn't calling the police. He was writing code. If we are going to do this, he said, not looking up, we need to make them think everything is normal. Put the earbuds back in, Darius. I looked at the black devices. A wave of nausea rolled over me. I didn't want to touch them. I felt like they were covered in slime. But I reached out and picked them up. I placed them back in my ears. The connection chimed. Hutch typed a command on his screen. The chirping on the scanner changed pitch. I have isolated the signal, Hutch whispered. We can control what they hear now. But for tonight, you have to act. You have to be the tired, oblivious old man they think you are. I nodded. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes. I pictured Braden and Tiana. I pictured the betrayal. And I pushed it all down into a deep, cold place in my gut. I would not cry. Not anymore. Hey, Hutch, I said loudly, forcing a chuckle that sounded like sandpaper. This jazz playlist is really something. Tiana really knows her old man's taste. I waited. Silence. Then, in my mind, I saw Braden smiling. I saw him thinking he had won. Enjoy your victory lap, son, I thought, because the race isn't over. You just started running against the wrong man. I opened my eyes and looked at the port. The containers stood silent and still in the rain. My kingdom. And I would burn it all down before I let them take it from me. The clock had started. 3 days to save my daughter, or 3 days to destroy her. I drove home from the port in silence, but for the first time in 40 years, the silence inside my truck felt loud. It was crowded with ghosts. The ghost of the little girl who used to sit in the passenger seat eating ice cream, and the ghost of the man I thought was my son-in-law. Every streetlight I passed felt like an interrogation lamp. When I pulled into my driveway, the house looked exactly the same as I had left it that morning. The grass was cut. The porch light was on. But it felt different. It felt like a crime scene. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the cool air of the hallway. My hand instinctively went to my pocket, where the earbuds sat inside their charging case. They felt heavy, like lead weights. I went into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were steady. They had to be. I was about to give the performance of a lifetime. I was not Darius King the father tonight. I was Darius King, the double agent. I took the earbuds out of the case and placed them in my ears. The familiar chime of the connection sounded. I knew Hutch was on the other end monitoring the feed, but I also knew that somewhere in a home office 5 miles away, a server was recording every breath I took. I took a deep breath and dialed Tiana's number. It rang 3 times before she picked up. "Hey, Dad," she said. Her voice sounded tight, strained. "Is everything okay?" I forced a chuckle. It scraped against my throat. "Everything is fine, baby girl," I said, leaning against the granite countertop. "I just wanted to call and say thank you again for the gift. The sound quality on these things is incredible. I have been listening to Miles Davis all night." I heard her let out a breath on the other end. a sigh of relief. "I am so glad you like them, Dad," she said. "I really wanted you to have something nice." "Yeah, well, they are perfect," I lied. I paused for a beat. I checked the time on the microwave clock. Now was the moment. "Listen, Tiana," I said, dropping my voice just a notch. "I might be tough to reach tomorrow night. I know we talked about maybe grabbing coffee, but I have to cancel." "Oh?" she asked. "Why?" "Work," I said, injecting a tone of exhaustion into my voice. "We have a massive headache coming in. A priority shipment of semiconductor chips. High-value stuff. The captain wants me to personally oversee the offloading at Dock 4. I let the lie hang in the air. Dock 4. That was the bait. The real shipment was coming into Dock 9, and it was not arriving until next Tuesday. But Braden did not know that. Braden only knew what I fed him. "Dock 4? Tiana repeated. She sounded confused. "But is that not the old maintenance pier?" "They are diverting it there for security," I said quickly, "to keep it away from the main traffic. It is arriving tomorrow night at 10, so I will be tied up until midnight." "Okay, Dad," she said. Her voice was trembling slightly. "Just be careful." I hung up the phone. I stood there in the middle of my kitchen and waited. I did not turn on the TV. I did not make dinner. I just watched the second hand on the clock tick around. Tick, tick, tick. If my daughter was innocent, she would have forgotten that conversation in 5 minutes. If Braden was just a bad husband but not a criminal, he would not care about dock numbers or shipping schedules. 10 minutes passed. The house settled. The refrigerator hummed. Then at exactly 14 minutes and 30 seconds past the hour, my phone rang. The name on the screen made my stomach turn over. Braden. I stared at it. Braden never called me. In 5 years of marriage to my daughter, he had called me exactly twice. Once to ask to borrow my truck, and once to ask if I would co-sign a loan. I let it ring twice before picking up. I needed to seem surprised. "Hello?" "Darius!" Braden's voice boomed through the speaker. It was loud. Too loud. It was manic energy masked as friendliness. "Hey, I hope I am not catching you at a bad time." "No," I said slowly. "Just getting ready to settle in. What is going on, Braden?" Nothing at all," he said. "Listen, Tiana and I were just talking, and we realized we have not treated you to a proper dinner in ages. I mean a real dinner, not just takeout. We were thinking about that steakhouse downtown, the one you like, Chop House, on me." My grip on the phone tightened. He was offering to buy me a $100 steak, this coming from a man who was allegedly broke. "That is generous, Braden," I said. "When were you thinking?" "Tomorrow night," he said quickly. "Around 7? Before your shift starts?" He was fishing. He wanted to get me out of the house. Or maybe he just wanted to butter me up before the heist. "I can't tomorrow," I said, baiting the hook again. "Like I told Tiana, I have a big night at the port." Right, Braden said, and I could hear the excitement leaking into his voice. "She mentioned something about that. Some big tech shipment? You know I follow the markets, Darius. The semiconductor industry is exploding right now. Is it true you guys are handling the new NVIDIA supply?" There it was. He was not even trying to hide it. He went straight for the money. "It is a big one," I admitted, playing the part of the proud worker. 12 million in hardware. We are locking down Dock 4 like Fort Knox. "Dock 4, Braden repeated. I could almost hear him scribbling it down. "Wow, that is intense. Well, hey, you are the man for the job, Darius. Nobody knows security like you." He paused. "So, I guess you will be pretty busy around 10 then." "Yeah," I said. "I will be right in the thick of it." "Well, good luck," he said. "Make us proud. We will do dinner next week then, once you are a hero." He hung up. I lowered the phone from my ear. The room felt colder than it had a minute ago. I walked over to the sink and gripped the edge until my knuckles turned white. There was no doubt anymore. No ambiguity. My son-in-law was planning to hit the port, and he was using my own words to plan the attack. But the worst part was not Braden. It was Tiana. She had relayed the information to him in less than 15 minutes. She had walked out of the room, or maybe he was standing right next to her, and she had given him the ammunition he needed to destroy me. My heart felt like it was cracking open in my chest. I wanted to weep. I wanted to throw the phone through the window, but I didn't. I was a dock worker. I was a man of steel and grit. I swallowed the pain and turned it into fuel. I looked down at the earbuds still in my hand. "You took the bait, son," I whispered to the empty room. "Now let's see if you can swallow the hook." I picked up the phone again and dialed Hutch. "We are on," I said when he answered. "They took the bait. Dock 4, tomorrow night." "Copy that," Hutch said. "I will alert the team." I hung up and turned off the lights. I sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the wind rattle the window panes. I was 72 years old. I should have been planning fishing trips. I should have been bouncing grandchildren on my knee. Instead, I was planning a sting operation to send my family to prison. "God help me," I whispered, "and God help them, because I won't." The Chop House was the kind of place where they dim the lights so you cannot see the prices on the menu. The waiters wore tuxedos that cost more than my first car, and the smell of truffle oil and aged beef hung heavy in the air. It was a place designed to make you feel important. But sitting across from Braden, all I felt was a cold, simmering rage that I had to drown in expensive Cabernet. Braden was in his element. He was wearing a navy blue suit that shimmered under the crystal chandelier. He laughed too loud. He ordered the most expensive bottle of wine without asking me or Tiana. He was playing the part of the successful son-in-law, the benevolent provider treating the old man to a night out. But I saw his eyes. They were hard, calculating, and they never stopped scanning the room. "Drink up, Darius," Braden said, refilling my glass before I had even finished the first sip. "This is a vintage from Napa. You do not get this kind of juice at the Union Hall, right?" I forced a smile. It felt like stretching dry clay. "No," I said, playing the part of the grateful, slightly overwhelmed blue-collar worker. "We stick to beer down at the docks. This is fancy stuff, Braden. You deserve it," he said, leaning forward. His elbows rested on the white tablecloth. "Especially with the big night you have coming up." He did not waste any time. We had not even ordered appetizers yet. Tiana sat next to him. She was wearing a long-sleeved dress, even though it was humid outside. She had not touched her wine. She had not touched her water. She was staring at the candle in the center of the table, as if she hoped the flame would rise up and swallow her whole. She looked small, shrinking. "So," Braden continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "Tiana tells me you are running the point on that semiconductor shipment. That is huge responsibility, Darius. Millions of dollars in microchips. How do you even secure something like that?" I took a long sip of wine, letting the liquid coat my throat. I needed the alcohol to numb the urge to reach across the table and strangle him. "It is all about the protocols," I said, slurring my words just a tiny bit, making him think the wine was working. "We use a rotating code system on the container locks. And the gate schedules. You have to time the trucks perfectly." Braden nodded, his eyes hungry. "Rotating codes. Interesting. And for tonight's shipment at Dock 4, what is the rotation?" I paused. I looked at Tiana. She was picking at a loose thread on the tablecloth. Her head was down. "I should not really talk about it," I said, looking back at Braden. "Security risks, you know." "Oh, come on, Dad," Braden said, flashing that shark-like grin. "It is just us, family. I am just fascinated by the logistics of it all. Plus, I worry about you. I want to know you are safe out there." Safe. The word sounded obscene coming from his mouth. I leaned in, lowering my voice. "Well, since it is family," I whispered, "we are using the beta protocol tonight. The gate code for the trucks is 7729, and we are keeping the perimeter lights off at the south end to avoid drawing attention." I saw Braden's hand twitch. He wanted to write it down. He wanted to pull out his phone and text his contacts immediately, but he held back. He just nodded, burning the numbers into his brain. 7729, South End Dark. "Got it," he said softly. "Smart, very smart." Then I looked at Tiana again. "Tiana, baby, are you okay?" I asked. "You haven't said a word." She jumped, as if I had shouted at her. She looked up, and for a second, our eyes locked. I saw terror, pure, unadulterated terror. Her makeup was thick, but it could not hide the puffiness around her eyes. "I am fine, Dad," she whispered. "Just a headache." She reached for her water glass. As she lifted her arm, the heavy gold bracelet she was wearing on her right wrist slid down. It was a thick, chunky piece of jewelry. Braden had given it to her for their anniversary. As it slid toward her elbow, it revealed the skin of her wrist. I stopped breathing. There, stark against her skin, were 3 dark purple marks. They were not accidental bumps. They were distinct, oval-shaped, fingerprints. Someone had grabbed her. Someone had grabbed her wrist and squeezed hard enough to crush the blood vessels, hard enough to leave a mark that makeup could not hide. I looked at Braden. He was busy scanning the wine list, oblivious to what I had just seen. Or maybe he just didn't care. The world slowed down. The clinking of silverware, the murmur of conversations, the soft jazz music. It all faded into a dull roar. My daughter was not a partner in this crime. She was a hostage. The realization hit me harder than any physical blow. I thought about the earbuds, the way she had begged me to wear them, the fear in her eyes when she gave them to me. Promise me. She wasn't trying to spy on me because she was greedy. She was trying to keep him happy. She was trying to keep him from hurting her again. She was the mule. He was the driver. And he was whipping her every step of the way. A cold clarity washed over me. The anger vanished, replaced by a steely, surgical resolve. If I exposed Braden tonight, he would go down. But Tiana? She was an accomplice. She had bought the bugs. She had delivered the information. The law would see her as a co-conspirator. But if I let this play out, if I let the trap snap shut tomorrow night, I looked at my daughter. She was trembling. She was trapped in a marriage that was essentially a cage with invisible bars. If I simply saved her, if I paid off Braden's debts or tried to fight him legally, he would never let her go. He would manipulate her, threaten her, maybe kill her next time he lost his temper. She needed to be somewhere he could not reach her. She needed to be somewhere with walls thick enough to keep him out. Prison. The thought was a jagged shard of glass in my heart, sending my own child to prison. It went against every instinct I had as a father. Fathers are supposed to keep their children out of cages. But in that moment, staring at the bruises on her wrist, I realized that prison was the only safe house left. In prison, Braden could not touch her. In prison, she would be away from his psychological torture. In prison, she would be forced to stand on her own 2 feet, away from his shadow. I would put her in jail to save her life. I took a deep breath and finished my wine. I set the glass down with a deliberate clink. "This wine is excellent, Braden," I said, my voice steady and strong. "Thank you." Braden smiled, thinking he had won, thinking he had played the old man for a fool. "You are welcome, Darius. To family." I raised my empty glass. "To family," I echoed. "And to justice," I added silently. I looked at Tiana one last time. "I am sorry, baby girl," I thought. "This is going to hurt you. It is going to break you. But I promise, when you come out on the other side, you will be free. And I will be waiting there to help you pick up the pieces. But first, I have to let the world crash down on us." I checked my watch. The trap was set. Hutch was ready. The fake shipment was scheduled. "Let's order," I said, picking up the menu. "I think I will have the steak. Rare, very rare, because tomorrow there would be blood." By 3 in the morning, the rain had stopped, but the storm inside the security booth was just getting started. The air smelled of stale coffee and ozone. Hutch was hunched over his laptop like a pianist at a concerto, his fingers moving in a blur across the keys. The screen reflected in his good eye, a cascading waterfall of green code that I did not understand but knew was about to save my life. "We are in," Hutch said, not looking up. "I have installed a mirror protocol on your phone, Darius. It acts as a firewall between the earbuds and the external server." He hit the enter key with a flourish and spun his chair around to face me. "Here is how it works. When you talk to me, or when you are just walking around, the earbuds pick up everything. But instead of sending that audio straight to Braden, it routes it here first. We can edit it. We can block it. Or, and this is the fun part, we can inject pre-recorded audio. We can make those earbuds hear whatever we want them to hear." I looked at the screen. It was a digital muzzle. My son-in-law thought he had a direct line to my world, but all he had was a line to a fiction I was about to write. "So we control the narrative," I said. "Exactly," Hutch grinned, a rare, wolfish expression. "We are the directors now, and Braden is just the audience. So, what movie are we going to show him?" I sat back, rubbing the stubble on my chin. I had been thinking about this all drive over. Braden was desperate. He was in debt to dangerous people. Microchips were good, sure. They were valuable. But you had to fence them. You had to find a buyer. You had to transport them. That took time and connections I wasn't sure Braden actually had. "No," I said slowly. If he is as deep in the hole as I think he is, he needs something faster. He needs liquidity. He needs cash. Hutch raised an eyebrow. Cash? In a shipping container? That is a myth, Darius. You know that. We haven't moved physical currency through this port since the 90s. I know that, I said. And you know that. But Braden? He is a finance guy. He thinks the world works like a movie. He thinks there are dark pools of money moving everywhere. We need to give him a score so big, so easy, that his greed overrides his common sense. I leaned forward. Tell him about Operation Greenback. Hutch laughed, a dry, barking sound. The old urban legend? About the repatriated bills from overseas bases coming back to be incinerated? That is the one, I said. Tell him there is a single 20-foot container arriving at Dock 4 tomorrow night. Tell him it is full of retired $100 bills from a base in Germany. Tell him it is off the books, low security because the money is technically marked for destruction. Hutch whistled low. Untraceable cash. That is like blood in the water for a shark. We spent the next hour crafting the script. We weren't just planning a sting. We were writing a play. We recorded sound effects, the beep of a forklift backing up, the static of a radio. Then I recorded my lines. I spoke into the microphone, pitching my voice to sound exhausted and loose-lipped. Yeah, Captain, I said into the mic, acting my heart out. I checked the manifest for container 404. It is the Greenback shipment. Pallets of cash. No armed guards this time, just a standard seal. Crazy how they moved this much money without a convoy. Hutch took the audio file and queued it up. When do we broadcast? He asked. I checked my watch. It was almost 4 a.m. Braden would be asleep, or lying awake staring at the ceiling, worrying about his kneecaps. Send it at 6 a.m., I said. Right when he wakes up. Catch him when his defenses are down. Just as we finished setting the trap, my phone buzzed on the desk. The screen lit up with a notification. It was not a call. It was a text message intercept. Hutch had set up the system to not only block the audio going out, but to mirror Tiana's phone activity whenever she communicated with the IP address associated with the server. I looked at the screen. It was a text from Braden to Tiana, sent just 2 minutes ago. Is he wearing them? The text read. I am not getting a signal. Wake him up if you have to. Make sure those things are in his ears 24/7. I need eyes on him, Tiana. Do not screw this up or we are both dead. I stared at the words. Or we are both dead. The anger that had been simmering in my gut flared up into a white-hot flame. This was not just greed anymore. This was a death threat. He was threatening my daughter. He was holding a gun to her head and forcing her to pull the trigger on her own father. Darius? Hutch asked softly. I picked up the earbuds. They felt cold. He wants me to wear them? I said, my voice trembling with rage. Fine. I will wear them. I shoved the buds into my ears. I will wear them until they burn a hole in my head, Hutch. I will wear them while I eat. I will wear them while I sleep. I want him to hear every breath I take. I want him to think he has me on a leash right up until the moment I wrap it around his neck. I looked at the computer screen where the fake audio file was waiting to be sent. The file that would lure Braden to Dock 4. The file that would end his life as he knew it. Send the file, Hutch, I commanded. Let's go fishing. Hutch hit the enter key. The progress bar loaded. Sending. Sent. Somewhere across the city, on a server in Braden's basement, a lie had just been planted. A lie about a box of money that didn't exist. But the consequences? Those were going to be very, very real. I sat back in the chair and watched the sunrise paint the sky over the harbor blood red. The trap was set. Now, all we had to do was wait for the rats to come out of the dark. I walked through the rusted gates of the port, with the sunrise burning the back of my neck. The air smelled of salt and diesel, the perfume of my life for 40 years. But today, the heavy work boots on my feet felt different. They were not just carrying a dock worker. They were carrying an actor, in a play where the final act was going to be a tragedy. The earbuds were in my ears, humming with that faint, electric static that told me the connection was live. I was not just walking into a shift, I was walking into a trap of my own making, and I had to make sure the rat took the cheese. I tapped the left earbud, signaling to the empty air that I was active. I kept my head down, moving past the security checkpoint, where the guards waved me through with sleepy nods. They did not know that the man they respected, the man who had trained half of them, was currently broadcasting federal secrets to a suburban basement 5 miles away. I made my way to the quieter side of the loading dock, near the old maintenance sheds. This was where we had decided the fake shipment would be processed. It was secluded, dark, and perfect for a heist. I looked around to make sure no one was actually within earshot. Then I began to speak. I kept my voice low, a conspiratorial rumble that the microphone would pick up perfectly. "Yeah, I know the protocol," I muttered, pretending to speak into a walkie-talkie. "Keep the lights at Sector 4 dark. We do not want anyone seeing the transfer. The manifest says spare parts, but we all know what is in those pallets." I paused, letting the silence hang there for a second. I imagined Braden sitting in his ergonomic chair, leaning forward, his heart pounding against his ribs as he listened to his father-in-law sell out. "It is the greenback liquidation," I whispered. "Retired currency, untraceable. Just make sure the gate is open at 10 sharp." I walked a few more steps, kicking a loose stone across the concrete. "Code 7729, I repeated. 7729. Don't write it down, just memorize it. I cut the act and walked briskly toward the security booth where Hutch was waiting. My heart was hammering a rhythm against my ribs that had nothing to do with exertion and everything to do with rage. Every lie I told felt like swallowing a stone, but I had to do it. I had to make the prize so shiny, so irresistible, that Braden would stop thinking and start reacting. I pushed open the door to the booth. Hutch was already there, his face bathed in the blue glow of 3 different monitors. He did not look up when I entered. His good eye was darting back and forth across a waterfall of data, cascading down the center screen. "Did he buy it?" I asked, pulling the earbuds out and tossing them onto the desk. I hated the feel of them. They felt like bugs crawling on my skin. Hutch held up a hand, silencing me. He pointed to a graph on the left monitor. A red line was spiking violently. "He didn't just buy it, Darius. He is feasting on it. Look at the data transfer rate. As soon as you said the gate code, the upload speed to his server tripled. He is recording, archiving, and replaying it. He probably listened to that snippet about the untraceable currency 5 times in the last 2 minutes. I nodded, feeling a grim satisfaction. We had him. We had proof of him receiving stolen security codes. That alone was enough for 5 to 10 years in federal prison. "Wrap it up, Hutch," I said, reaching for my coffee mug. "We have enough to bury him. Let's call the FBI and get this over with before he actually tries to drive a truck through the gate." But Hutch did not move to the phone. He leaned closer to the screen, his brow furrowed. The lines on his forehead deepened into canyons. "Wait," he murmured. "Something is wrong." "What is it?" I asked, stepping closer. "I am tracking the outbound signal from Braden's server," Hutch said, his voice tight. "He is not just storing the data, Darius. He is streaming it. He is rebroadcasting your voice in real time." "Streaming it to who?" I asked. "Tiana?" "No," Hutch shook his head. He typed a furious command into the terminal. The screen flashed, resolving into a map of the globe. A red line shot out from Baltimore, arched across the Atlantic Ocean, and landed deep in Eastern Europe. I stared at the screen. The destination point was blinking in a city I couldn't pronounce. "That is an encrypted relay node," Hutch said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I am breaking the encryption now. Hang on." The screen flickered again. A chat window popped up. It wasn't Braden's interface. It was a mirrored view of what Braden was seeing on his own screen. The text was not in English. It was in Cyrillic. "Russian," I breathed. Hutch hit a translation key. The jagged Russian letters dissolved and rearranged themselves into English. The message was short, brutal. "The package is confirmed. If the codes are wrong, you will not need a bank. You will need a coffin." The signature at the bottom was a single word: Volkov. The blood drained from my face. I had worked on the docks long enough to know the names that were whispered in the dark corners of the shipping world. Volkov was not a street gang. Volkov was the Bratva, the Russian mafia. They didn't deal in petty theft. They dealt in human trafficking, arms dealing, and industrial-scale narcotics. Braden wasn't just a desperate gambler trying to pay off a bookie. He had sold his soul to the devil. He was trading sensitive port data to a foreign crime syndicate. Hutch spun his chair around. He looked terrified. "Darius, this changes everything. This is not theft anymore. This is national security, and it is a death sentence. If Braden messes this up, they won't just break his legs. They will kill him, and they will kill anyone connected to him. I thought of Tiana, my little girl, with her bruised wrist and her terrified eyes. She didn't know. She couldn't know. She thought she was helping her husband pay off a debt. She didn't know she was handing keys to wolves who would eat her alive without a second thought. The stakes had just skyrocketed. I wasn't just trying to save my daughter from a bad marriage anymore. I was trying to save her from being executed. If we call the FBI now, I said, thinking aloud, my voice hoarse, they will raid the house. It will be all over the news. The Russians will know Braden was compromised. They might decide to tie up loose ends before the cops even get him into an interrogation room. We have to control the takedown, Hutch said. We have to trap them inside the port, tonight. If we catch them in the act, in a contained environment, we can take Braden into custody safely. But if he gets spooked, if he runs, the Volkovs will find him first. I looked at the earbuds on the desk. They were no longer just a nuisance. They were the only lifeline keeping my family from being slaughtered. We stick to the plan, I said, my voice hardening into steel. But we need more than just port security tonight. Call your contact at the bureau. Tell him we are serving up a Russian cell on a silver platter. But tell him I want the perimeter locked down so tight a mosquito couldn't get out. I looked at the map again. The red line connecting my house to Russia, pulsing like an infected vein. My son-in-law wanted to play gangster, I said softly. Well, he is about to find out that the only thing harder than getting into the mob is getting out. I picked up the earbuds and put them back in. Let's go to work, Hutch. We have a shipment to deliver, and I want to make sure the receipt is written in blood. The knock on my door came at 7 in the evening, and it sounded like desperation. It wasn't the rhythmic, confident knock of a visitor. It was a frantic, uneven pounding that rattled the glass pane in the center of the oak door. I was sitting in my armchair, the earbuds in my ears, listening to the silence of my own house, amplified by the microphone. But when I heard that sound, I knew exactly who it was. I opened the door and Tiana practically fell into the hallway. She looked like a wreck. Her hair, usually pulled back in a sleek professional bun, was loose and frizzy. Her eyes were red-rimmed and swollen, surrounded by dark circles that spoke of sleepless nights. She was wearing a trench coat that was buttoned all the way up to her chin, despite the warm evening air. I knew why. She was hiding the bruises on her wrists. She was hiding the evidence of Braden's panic. "Daddy," she sobbed, throwing her arms around my neck. I froze. For a second, just a split second, I wanted to hug her back. I wanted to be the father who fixes everything. I wanted to tell her that I knew about the Russians, about the debts, about the trap at Dock 4. I wanted to tell her that the cavalry was coming. But I couldn't. Not yet. If I broke character now, if I showed her any mercy, she would run back to Braden and tell him everything. She was too terrified of him to keep my secret. To save her, I had to let her hit rock bottom. I gently pried her arms off my shoulders and stepped back. "Tiana?" I said, keeping my voice confused and concerned. "What is wrong? Is it Braden? Is he hurt?" She shook her head violently, wiping tears from her cheeks with the back of her hand. No, Braden is fine. We are fine. It is just business, Daddy. It is just money." She walked into the living room, pacing back and forth on the rug her mother had bought 20 years ago. The house was quiet, but to me, the air was screaming with tension. "We have a liquidity problem," she said, the words rushing out of her mouth like water from a broken dam. "Braden's investment firm. The markets took a sudden turn. His capital is tied up in overseas bonds. It is temporary, just a few days. But he needs cash to cover the margin calls. If he doesn't pay by Friday, he loses the firm. He loses everything." She stopped pacing and looked at me. Her eyes were wide, pleading. "We need a bridge loan, Daddy. The bank is asking for collateral." I stood by the fireplace, my hand resting on the mantel. I knew where this was going. I had been waiting for this ask for 5 years. "Collateral?" I asked slowly. "What kind of collateral?" She took a breath, a shaky, jagged breath. "The house," she whispered. I looked around the room. I looked at the crown molding I had installed myself. I looked at the scratches on the floorboards from when Tiana was learning to walk in her baby walker. This house wasn't an asset. It was a museum of my life. It was the only thing I had left of my wife. And Braden, that shark in a suit, wanted to feed it to the Russian mob. "You want me to sign over the deed?" I asked. My voice was low, dangerous. "It is just on paper," she cried, stepping closer. "You won't have to move. Nothing will change. As soon as the bonds clear next week, we pay off the loan, and the deed comes right back to you," Braden promised. He swore on his life. "Braden's life is not worth the deed to this house," I said. The room went deadly silent. Tiana recoiled as if I had slapped her. "Daddy, please," she begged, her voice cracking. "You don't understand. If he doesn't get the money—" She stopped. She couldn't say it. She couldn't say if he doesn't get the money, the men with the thick accents and the cold eyes are going to kill us. "If he doesn't get the money, what?" I pressed. "He has to file for bankruptcy? He has to sell his Porsche? He has to get a real job like the rest of us?" "You are being selfish," she screamed. The veneer of the sweet daughter cracked, revealing the panicked, cornered animal underneath. "You have this big house all to yourself. You are sitting on equity while we are drowning. Do you want to see us on the street?" I looked at her. I looked at the daughter, who had just bugged my ears and sold my security codes. "I am not signing anything, Tiana," I said. "I built this life with my bare hands. I lifted crates until my back gave out so you could go to college. I am not gambling my roof so your husband can play stock market god." I turned my back on her. I walked over to the kitchen counter where my smartphone was charging. I unplugged it and set it down on the coffee table, right in front of her. "I need to use the restroom," I said, my voice weary. "You can let yourself out, or you can stay and cry. But the answer is no." I walked down the hallway, my heavy boots thudding on the wood. I went into the bathroom and closed the door, but I didn't lock it. And I didn't use the facilities. I sat on the edge of the tub and pulled out a small secondary monitor device Hutch had given me. It was linked to the camera on my laptop, which was sitting open on the desk in the corner of the living room, facing the coffee table. I watched the screen. In the living room, Tiana stood frozen for a moment. She looked at the hallway where I had disappeared. Then, she looked at the phone on the table. Braden must have given her orders. If he refuses the house, get access to his phone. We need a tracker. We need to know where he is every second of every day. The earbuds were good for audio, but they didn't have GPS. If I took them out, they were blind. Braden needed a backup. I watched my daughter wipe her eyes. Her face changed. The sadness vanished, replaced by a terrifying determination. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small flash drive. Then she reached for my phone. She picked it up. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She tried to swipe it open. Enter passcode. I saw her lips move. She was whispering the numbers. 1, 9, 8, 9. Her birth year. That had been my passcode for 10 years. She typed it in. Incorrect passcode. She frowned. She typed it again, faster this time. 1, 9, 8, 9. Incorrect passcode. Try again in 30 seconds. On the small screen in my hand, I saw the blood drain from her face. She looked at the phone as if it had bitten her. She tried a different combination. Maybe her mother's birthday. Maybe my anniversary. Phone disabled for 1 minute. She slammed the phone back down on the table. She looked at the hallway door, panic rising in her chest. She realized something had changed. Her father, the simple, old man who couldn't work a microwave, had changed his security. Why? The question was written all over her face. Why would he change it? Does he know? She grabbed the flash drive and shoved it back into her purse. She couldn't install the tracker if she couldn't unlock the phone. She had failed. I put the monitor away and flushed the toilet to make noise. I ran the tap water, splashed some on my face, and looked in the mirror. My eyes were hard, cold. I walked back out into the living room. Tiana was standing by the door, her hand on the knob. She looked like she was about to vomit. "Leaving so soon?" I asked. I have to go," she stammered. "Braden is waiting." She didn't look at me. She couldn't. She opened the door and ran out into the night, leaving behind the smell of expensive perfume and fear. I walked over to the coffee table and picked up my phone. The screen was still lit up with the disabled warning. I sat down on the sofa and put the earbuds back in. "Hutch," I said into the silence. "I am here, Dee," Hutch's voice came through, clear and steady. "I saw the log. She tried to crack your phone. She is desperate," I said. "She just asked for the house." "Did you give it to her?" I gave her nothing, I said, just enough rope to hang herself. I looked out the window. Tiana's car was speeding away down the street, taillights blurring in the darkness. She was going back to him empty-handed. He would be furious. He would be terrified. And a terrified man makes mistakes. Get the team ready, Hutch, I said. Braden is going to be reckless tonight. He didn't get the money from the house. He didn't get the tracker on my phone. All he has left is the shipment at Dock 4. It is his only way out. He is going to come at us with everything he has, Hutch said. Good, I said, because I am done playing defense. I stood up and went to the closet. I pulled out my old navy blue work jacket. I put it on. It smelled like the sea. Tonight, the port wasn't just a workplace. It was a hunting ground, and the wolves were already at the gate. The morning of the second day broke with a gray, leaden sky that seemed to press down on the roof of my house. I did not sleep. I spent the night in my armchair by the window, watching the street through a crack in the blinds. I was waiting for them, and they did not disappoint. At 6 in the morning, a black sedan with tinted windows rolled slowly down the block. It did not pass by. It pulled over 3 houses down, the engine idling with a low, menacing rumble that I could feel in my chest. They were not subtle. They did not care about being seen. This was a message. It was the Volkov signature. We know where you live. We are watching. I sipped my cold coffee and watched the exhaust plume rise from their tailpipe. Inside that car sat men who killed for a living. Men who looked at a human life the way I looked at a shipping invoice. Just another number to be processed or deleted, and my son-in-law had invited them to my doorstep. My phone buzzed on the side table. It was Hutch. They are restless, the text read. Braden has checked the server logs 50 times in the last hour. He is sweating bullets, D. I put the earbuds in. The connection chimed, a cheerful little sound that felt perverse given the circumstances. I could hear the faint ambient noise from Braden's end. He wasn't at his office. He was at home. I heard the clinking of glass, too early for water, likely vodka, and the heavy, frantic pacing of footsteps on hardwood floors. He was terrified. Good. A terrified man makes mistakes. A terrified man stops thinking about the long game and starts thinking about survival. It was time to tighten the screws. I needed to force his hand. I needed to make sure that tonight, the night of the trap, he didn't get cold feet. I needed him desperate enough to commit the crime, but panicked enough to be sloppy. I dialed his number. He picked up on the first ring. Darius? Is everything okay? You are heading to the port soon, right? His voice was high-pitched, breathless. He sounded like a man standing on a ledge. I let out a long, confused sigh. The sigh of an old man who is overwhelmed. I am getting ready, Braden, I said, my voice trembling just enough to be convincing. But listen, I have ran into a bit of a snag. Silence on the other end. Then, a sharp intake of breath. What snag? What are you talking about? It is the safe in the main office, I said, rubbing my forehead as if I could massage the lie into truth. The manifest for that special shipment. The cash shipment? It is locked inside, and for the life of me, I cannot remember the combination. I heard glass shatter on his end. He must have dropped the bottle. You forgot the code? Braden screamed. How can you forget the code? You have worked there for 40 years. I know, I apologized, playing the part of the senile fool. It is just, my mind is foggy lately. Maybe it is the stress. I tried my birthday. I tried the standard admin code. Nothing works. Think, Darius. Think, Braden shouted. It is 7/7 something? Or maybe your anniversary. Try everything. I have tried, son, I said. I am locked out. Look, it is not a big deal. The captain comes in tomorrow morning at 8. He has the master key. I will just wait until then to pull the paperwork. The shipment can sit on the dock overnight. It is secure. No! Braden roared. The word tore through the speaker so loud I had to pull the earbud away. No, it cannot wait until tomorrow. It has to be tonight. The trucks, the logistics, everything is set for tonight. You cannot delay this, Darius. I do not have a choice, Braden, I said, sounding defeated. Without that paperwork, I cannot open the gate. The system won't authorize the exit. I am sorry. I will just have to tell the drivers to come back. There was a silence on the line so profound it felt like a physical weight. I knew what was happening in his head. He was picturing the Russians. He was picturing the black sedan outside. He was picturing what they would do to him if he told them the deal was off because his father-in-law had a senior moment. He was doing the math of his own survival. Don't do anything yet, Braden stammered, his voice dropping to a frantic whisper. Do not call the drivers. Do not call the captain. Just go to the port. Go to the office. Braden, I told you I can't. Just go, he snapped. I will figure something out. Just be there. And keep these earbuds in. Do not take them out. He hung up. I sat back in my chair and watched the black sedan outside. The driver rolled down the window and flicked a cigarette butt onto the pavement. I counted to 10. 1, 2, 3. At the count of 7, Hutch sent me an alert. Intercepted call. Braden to Tiana. I switched the feed to listen. Tiana picked up. She sounded like she had been crying. Braden? I'm at the grocery store. Shut up and listen to me, Braden hissed. Your father is losing it. He says he forgot the safe combination. The shipment is tonight, Tiana. Tonight. What do you want me to do? Tiana asked, her voice trembling. Go down there, Braden ordered. Go to the port. Tonight. Take him dinner. Take him coffee. I don't care. Just get into that office and make him remember that code. Braden, I can't go down there, Tiana pleaded. It is a restricted zone, and I can't face him again. He knows something is wrong. You will go, Braden said, and his voice turned into ice. Or you can explain to our friends from Eastern Europe why they are not getting their money. Do you want them to pay a visit to you instead? Do you want to be the collateral, Tiana? I heard her sob, a broken, terrified sound. Fine, she whispered. I will go. Get the code, Braden said, or don't bother coming home. The line went dead. I took the earbuds out and set them on the table. My hands were shaking, but not from age. I was shaking with a fury so cold it burned. He was sending her. He was too cowardly to come himself. He was too scared to face me or the risk of arrest. So he was using his wife, my daughter, as a human shield. He was throwing her into the line of fire to save his own skin. I stood up and walked to the window. The black sedan was still there. I am coming for you, I whispered to the unseen men in the car. But first, I have to save her from him. I went to the closet and pulled out my heavy coat. I grabbed my keys. I checked my pocket for the old silver locket with Tiana's baby picture in it. I always carried it on difficult shifts, and tonight would be the hardest shift of my life. I walked out the front door, locking it deliberately behind me. I glared at the black sedan as I walked to my truck. I saw the silhouette of a head turn to watch me. Let them watch. Let them follow. I drove to the port, knowing that in a few hours my daughter would walk through those gates. She would come to betray me. She would come to steal from me. But she was also coming to me for help, even if she didn't know it yet. Tonight, I had to be the villain in her story, so that I could be the hero in her life. I had to let her break the law, so I could break the chains that bound her to that monster. I pulled onto the highway, the port cranes looming in the distance like giant steel skeletons against the darkening sky. The stage was set. The actors were moving into place, and I was ready to bring the curtain down. The rain pounded against the corrugated metal roof of the warehouse, sounding like 1,000 hammers, beating out a rhythm of doom. I sat on a stack of wooden pallets in the center of the dimly lit bay. The air here was thick with the smell of sawdust and hydraulic fluid. It was a smell I usually loved, but tonight it made me nauseous. I checked my watch. It was 11 at night. The port was officially quiet, but the ghosts were loud. I had the earbuds in my pocket, not in my ears. I wanted this conversation to be offline, or at least as offline as it could be. I knew Braden was probably pacing his living room wondering why the audio feed had gone dead. Let him sweat. Let him think the signal dropped because of the storm. The small service door at the far end of the warehouse creaked open. A slice of yellow street lamp light cut across the concrete floor, followed by a shadow. Tiana stepped inside. She looked like a drowned rat. Her expensive trench coat was soaked through dark patches of water, staining the beige fabric. Her hair was plastered to her skull, and mascara ran down her cheeks in black, jagged rivers. She was shivering violently, but I knew it was not just from the cold. I did not stand up. I stayed seated on the pallets, watching her walk the long, lonely stretch of concrete toward me. She looked so small in this cavernous space. For a fleeting second, I saw the 6-year-old girl who used to run to me when she scraped her knee. But that girl was gone. The woman walking toward me was an accomplice to treason. "Daddy," she whispered when she got close enough to see my face in the shadows. I did not answer. I just looked at her. I let the silence stretch out between us until it was tight enough to snap a neck. "I am sorry," she choked out. "I am so sorry." "Sit down, Tiana," I said, pointing to an overturned crate. My voice was flat, devoid of warmth. She sat. She wrapped her arms around herself, rocking back and forth slightly. "Tell me," I said, "and do not lie to me. If you lie to me, Tiana, I will walk out that door and I will never speak to you again." She took a shuddering breath. She looked at her hands, the hands that had given me the poison gift. "It is Braden," she said. Her voice was so quiet, I had to lean forward to hear it over the rain. "He is in trouble, Daddy. Real trouble. It is not just the business. It is not just bad investments." "Go on," I said. "He owes money," she said, "to people you do not say no to. He borrowed from a private lender to cover his losses last year. He thought he could double it and pay them back, but he lost it all. Now they want their money, and they want interest." "How much?" I asked. $2 million, she whispered. I let out a harsh, humorless laugh. $2 million. He sold his soul and my safety for $2 million. In the grand scheme of international shipping, that was crumbs. But for a desperate man, it was a mountain. "And let me guess," I said, "he does not have it." She shook her head. "He has nothing. We have nothing. They gave him a deadline. Tomorrow night. If he does not pay, they are going to take it out in blood." She looked up at me then, and her eyes were wild with terror. "They know where we live, Daddy. They know where you live. They sent photos. Photos of me walking to my car. Photos of you at the grocery store." I kept my face like stone. I already knew this. I had seen the black sedan. "So what is the plan, Tiana?" I asked. "What does your husband want from me?" She reached into her wet coat pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. Her hand shook so bad she almost dropped it. "He says there is a shipment," she said. "A container at Dock 4. He says you know about it. The cash shipment." I nodded slowly. The lie I had planted had taken root. "He says he has a buyer for the cash," she continued. "He says if he can just get that container out of the port, he can pay off the debt and we can all disappear. We can start over." "And where do I fit in?" I asked. She swallowed hard. "Gate 6, she said. "He needs you to open Gate 6 tomorrow night at midnight. He has a truck arranged, a driver. They will bypass the main way station. All they need is for the electronic lock on Gate 6 to be disabled for 5 minutes. Gate 6. That was the emergency exit on the north side. It led directly to the old industrial highway. It was the perfect escape route. "So that is it," I said, standing up. "You want me to be an accessory to grand larceny. You want me to steal federal property. You want me to throw away 40 years of an honest life. Daddy, please," she begged, standing up too and reaching for my hand. I pulled away. "For what, Tiana?" I roared, and my voice echoed off the steel rafters. "For him? For that man who treats you like a servant? For that man who put bruises on your wrist?" She flinched, covering her wrist instinctively. "You sold me out," I hissed, stepping closer to her. "You gave me those earbuds not because you love me, but because you wanted to spy on me. You fed him my secrets. You let him turn your father into a criminal." "No," she cried. "I didn't want to. He made me." "He made you?" I shouted. "Did he hold a gun to your head when you wrapped that gift? Did he hold a gun to your head when you smiled at me across the dinner table?" I stopped breathing hard. The anger was real. It wasn't acting anymore. I was furious at her weakness. I was furious that she had let him strip away her dignity. "You had a choice, Tiana," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You could have come to me. You could have told me the truth months ago. We could have gone to the police. We could have fought this. But you chose him. You chose the lie." "Daddy, you do not understand," she screamed, and the sound was raw and primal. It tore through the warehouse. "He will kill me." The words hung in the air, vibrating with absolute certainty. She collapsed onto her knees on the cold, dirty concrete. She grabbed the hem of my pants, sobbing uncontrollably. "He is crazy, Daddy. He is not the man I married. He has a gun. He sleeps with it. He told me if I do not get you to open that gate, he is going to put a bullet in my head, and then he is going to come for you. I am not doing this for the money. I do not care about the money. I just want to live. Please, Daddy, I just want to live." I looked down at her, my daughter, my flesh and blood, crawling in the dirt at my feet. My heart broke. It shattered into dust. I knew in that moment that she was telling the truth, at least her version of it. She truly believed she was going to die. Braden had broken her spirit so completely that she saw no other way out. I knelt down. I didn't hug her. I couldn't, not yet, but I placed a hand on her shoulder. "Get up," I said softly. She looked up at me, her face a mask of tragedy. "Will you do it?" she asked. "Will you open the gate?" I looked at her tear-stained face. I looked at the fear in her eyes. I had to give her hope. I had to give her the rope to pull herself out of the pit, even if that rope was attached to a trap door. "Yes," I lied. She let out a sob of relief that sounded painful. "I will do it," I said. "Not for him. If it were up to me, I would let the Russians have him. But I will do it for you, because I promised your mother I would always keep you safe." "Thank you," she wept. "Thank you, Daddy." I stood up and pulled her to her feet. "Go home, Tiana," I said. "Tell Braden the gate will be open. Tell him, gate 6 at midnight. Tell him to bring his truck, and tell him he better not miss." She nodded, wiping her face. "I love you, Daddy," she whispered. I looked at her, and for the first time in my life I couldn't say it back. The words stuck in my throat. "Just go," I said. She turned and ran back toward the door, her footsteps echoing in the emptiness. I watched her leave. As soon as the door closed, I reached into my pocket and put the earbuds back in. "Hutch," I said, my voice cold as the grave. "I am here, Dee," Hutch replied. I heard everything on the backup mic. "Change of plans," I said. "Move the extraction team to gate 6. That is where we bury them." "Roger that," Hutch said. "And Dee?" "Yeah? You are a hell of an actor." I looked at the wet spot on the floor where my daughter had knelt. "I wasn't acting, Hutch," I whispered. I turned and walked back into the shadows. The stage was set for the final act. Tomorrow night, the curtain would fall. And when it rose again, my family would be gone. I watched the taillights of my daughter's car disappear into the sheets of rain that were sweeping across the industrial park. The red glow lingered on the wet asphalt for a moment, like a smear of blood before vanishing into the night. I stood there in the doorway of the warehouse, shivering, not from the cold, but from the radioactive half-life of the lie I had just told her. I had looked my only child in the eye and told her I would commit a felony to save her husband. I had given her hope, but it was the kind of hope you give a terminal patient when you know there is nothing left to do but manage the pain. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the earbuds case. The little blue light was blinking steady and calm. I put them in my ears. The seal was tight, blocking out the sound of the storm and replacing it with the low hum of the connection. "Hutch," I said, my voice cracking like dry wood. "Did you get it?" There was a pause on the line, a long, heavy pause where I could hear Hutch breathing on the other end. "I got it, Dee," he said softly. "Every word." "Is it clean?" I asked. "Crystal clear," Hutch replied. "The admission of guilt, the request for the gate opening. But more importantly, Dee, we got the duress. We got her saying he threatened to kill her. We got her saying she just wants to live. That is the golden ticket." I leaned back against the rusted metal door frame and closed my eyes. That audio file was now the most valuable thing I owned. It was a double-edged sword. On one side, it was a confession that would guarantee Tiana went to prison. No judge in the world could ignore a recording of a woman conspiring to facilitate a multi-million-dollar heist. But on the other side, it was her salvation. Without that recording, she was just a co-conspirator, a greedy wife helping her husband rob the port. But with that recording, she was a hostage, a battered woman acting under the threat of immediate death. That file was the difference between 20 years in a federal penitentiary and 2 years in a minimum security facility with a chance for parole. "I am sending her to jail, Hutch." I whispered more to myself than to him. "I am sending my own baby girl to jail. You are saving her life, Darius," Hutch said, his voice firm. "If she stays out here with him, she is dead. If she goes to prison, she is safe. The Russians cannot touch her inside. Braden cannot touch her inside. You are putting her in a bunker. It is just an ugly bunker." "I know," I said. "I know." But knowing it did not make it hurt any less. I thought about the way she had kneeled on the dirty floor, the way she had grabbed my pant leg. She trusted me. She believed that tomorrow night at midnight, I was going to open Gate 6 and let them drive away into the sunset. She did not know that Gate 6 was a dead end. She did not know that instead of an open road, she would be driving straight into a wall of SWAT shields and blinding floodlights. I pushed off the door frame and walked back into the warehouse. I needed to move. I needed to do something with my hands, because if I stood still, I was going to scream. I walked over to the main breaker box on the wall. This was part of the setup. If I was going to sell the lie, I had to make it look real. I opened the panel and found the switch for the perimeter lights at Gate 6. I reached out and flipped the switch. Click. Outside, a bank of high-pressure sodium lights flickered and died, plunging the north side of the yard into darkness. To Braden, watching on his satellite feeds or listening through the bugs, this would look like compliance. It would look like Darius King, the corrupt old man, was preparing the ground for the heist. But in reality, I was just setting the stage for the ambush. I recorded it too, I said, tapping the earbud. I want you to make sure that timestamp is verified, Hutch. When the lawyers get involved, I want zero doubt that she was coerced. It is already backed up to 3 secure servers, D. Hutch said. It is bulletproof. Good, I said. I walked through the dark warehouse, my footsteps echoing on the concrete. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. I had spent 40 years building a reputation as a man of honor. A man who followed the rules. A man who protected this port as if it were my own home. And tomorrow night, I was going to burn that reputation to the ground. I was going to let the world think I was a thief. I was going to let the FBI put handcuffs on me. I was going to let the media drag my name through the mud. Because that was the only way to get close enough to Braden to make sure he never hurt anyone again. I had to be the villain. I stopped at the heavy rolling door of Gate 6. I placed my hand on the cold steel. Tomorrow, this door would open, and hell would drive right through it. Hutch, I said, get the team ready. Tell the FBI agent that the target is confirmed. Tell them we have a hostile entity entering the perimeter at 0000 hours. Tell them to bring heavy armor. Braden is desperate, and he claims to be armed. Copy that, Hutch said. And D, yeah, get some sleep. You sound like you are dying. I am not dying, Hutch, I said, staring at the dark metal. I am already dead. The man who walks out of here tomorrow night will be someone else entirely. I took the earbuds out and put them in my pocket. I did not want to hear any more. I did not want to hear Braden's celebration. I did not want to hear his plans. I walked out into the rain, allowing the cold water to wash over my face. It could not wash away the guilt, but it numbed the skin. I got into my truck and started the engine. I had made the deal. I had signed the contract in invisible ink. Gate 6, midnight. I was going to open the door, but I was not going to let them leave. I was going to lock them in. And when the steel bars slammed shut behind my daughter, I would be the one holding the key. I drove home through the empty streets, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm of resolve. I would save her. I would save her from the Russians. I would save her from her husband. And one day, maybe 10 years from now, when she was free and safe and standing on her own 2 feet, maybe she would understand. Or maybe she would hate me forever. I could live with her hatred. I could not live with her funeral. The choice was made. Now, all that was left was the execution. The storm that night was biblical. It was as if the heavens knew what was about to happen and decided to wash the sins of the city away before they were even committed. I stood in the glass-enclosed observation tower of the Port Authority building, looking down at the sprawl of wet asphalt and towering steel cranes. The rain was coming down in sheets, turning the floodlights into blurry halos of orange and white. It was midnight, the witching hour. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the earbuds. My hands were steady, colder than ice, but steady. I put them in. The connection chimed, a cheerful little sound that felt like a mockery in the face of the darkness below. I tapped the mic. I am in position, I said into the void. Gate 6 is open. The sensors are disabled. You have a 5-minute window before the automated patrol sweeps the sector. There was a crackle of static, and then Braden's voice filled my head. It was clear, arrogant, and sickeningly dry. He wasn't out here in the rain. He wasn't risking his neck on the wet pavement. Good, Braden said. The transport is approaching the perimeter. Guide them in, Darius, and do not get cute. My friends in the car are very nervous people. I looked down at the access road. A pair of headlights cut through the driving rain. It was a heavy box truck, unmarked, followed closely by the black sedan I had seen outside my house. They moved slowly, like predators stalking prey. As the truck passed under the security camera at the main checkpoint, I looked at the monitor on my console. Hutch had set up a direct feed. The camera zoomed in on the driver's seat of the truck. My heart stopped beating. I had expected Braden to be driving. I had expected him to be the one gripping the wheel, sweating in his expensive suit, finally taking a risk for his own greed. But the figure behind the wheel was small. The hands gripping the steering wheel were shaking. It was Tiana. A wave of nausea rolled over me so powerful I had to grip the console to keep from falling. He had not just sent her to deliver a message. He had sent her to drive the getaway vehicle. He had put her in the cockpit of a felony while he sat safe and warm in his home office, directing the operation like a general playing a video game. "He is a coward," I whispered, forgetting for a second that the mic was live. "What did you say?" Braden's voice snapped in my ear. "I said the coast is clear," I lied, my voice turning into a growl. "I see the truck." "Yeah?" Braden laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "She is a better driver than she looks, right? I told her if she scratches the paint, she is walking home. Now guide her to the container." I looked at the screen again. In the passenger seat next to my terrified daughter sat a man with a thick neck and a shaved head. He wasn't looking at the road. He was looking at Tiana, and in his lap, the dull glint of a suppressor attached to a pistol was visible even through the grainy night vision. If she panicked, she died. If she tried to run, she died. If I messed this up, she died. I took a deep breath, inhaling the smell of recycled air and stale coffee. I had to be the voice of God now. I had to guide her through the valley of the shadow of death. "Driver," I said, my voice projecting calm authority through the earbuds. Hoping Tiana could hear me through the speaker system Braden had undoubtedly rigged in the truck. "Proceed forward to Sector 4. Do not stop at the way station. Turn left at the blue crane." I watched the truck hesitate, then lurch forward. She was listening. "Keep going," I said. "You are going to see a row of red containers on your right. Ignore them. The target container is in the isolation zone at the end of the pier. It is marked with a yellow hazard diamond. Isolation zone. That was code. In port language, the isolation zone was where we put leaking chemical drums or unstable cargo. It was a dead end. A concrete box surrounded by 20-foot-high steel walls and electrified fencing. It was designed to keep dangerous things in. Tonight, it would keep dangerous men from getting out. "I am not seeing it, Darius," Braden's voice crackled, impatient and edgy. "Where is the cash? Where is the shipment?" "It is further back," I said. "Tell her to keep driving. Past the maintenance shed, into the bay labeled special cargo." The truck rumbled past the shed. The black sedan followed close behind, like a shark trailing a wounded whale. I watched them turn the corner. They were entering the trap. "Okay," I said. "You are approaching the drop point. There is a single blue container sitting by itself against the seawall. That is it. That is the money." I saw the brake lights flare red in the rain. The truck came to a stop inside the high-walled enclosure. The sedan pulled in right behind it, blocking the exit. "Perfect," Braden breathed in my ear. "I can see it on the GPS. They are in." I looked down at the scene. It looked like a movie set. The rain, the dark vehicles, the industrial bleakness. But the stakes were blood and bone. Tiana opened the driver's side door. She stepped out into the mud. She looked tiny next to the massive wheels of the truck. The man from the passenger seat got out too. 2 more men stepped out of the black sedan. They were all armed. They moved with the efficiency of soldiers. They walked toward the blue container. The man with the shaved head gestured for Tiana to go first. He wanted her to open it. If it was booby-trapped, if it was a bomb, she would be the one to take the blast. My knuckles were white as I gripped the microphone. "Go ahead," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and sorrow. "Open it. It is unlocked." I watched my daughter reach for the latch of the container. Her hand touched the cold steel. Braden was panting in my ear. I could hear his breath hitching. He was counting the money in his head. He was already spending it. "Open it," Braden hissed. Tiana threw the latch. She pulled the heavy doors open. The container was empty. There was no money, no pallets of cash, just a hollow, echoing darkness. "What the hell?" Braden screamed in my ear. "Darius! What is this? Where is the money?" I reached out to the control panel on my desk. My finger hovered over a large red button, the button that controlled the hydraulic security gates for the isolation zone. "The money isn't there, Braden," I said softly, "and neither are you." I pressed the button. Down in the yard, massive steel shutters slammed down over the entrance to the enclosure. The sound was like a thunderclap, louder than the storm. The truck and the sedan were sealed inside the concrete box. "What did you do?" Braden shrieked. His voice was no longer arrogant. It was the squeal of a trapped rat. "Darius! Open the gate! Open it!" I stood up and looked down at the men scrambling below. They were shouting, waving their guns, realizing they were trapped. Tiana was standing by the empty container, frozen. "I am sorry, Braden," I said into the mic, "but the shipment has been canceled." I pulled the earbuds out of my ears and dropped them onto the floor. I crushed them under the heel of my boot. The plastic shattered. The connection died. The silence in the tower was absolute. I picked up my walkie-talkie. "Hutch," I said. "They are boxed in. The package is secure." "Copy that, D." Hutch's voice came back, grim and ready. "Light them up." I looked down one last time as the floodlights around the isolation zone blazed to life, turning the night into blinding day. The trap had snapped shut. Now came the reckoning. The area they were driving into was not a loading bay. We call it the kill box. It is a quarantine zone designed for hazardous materials, leaking chemical drums, and unstable cargo that needs to be isolated from the rest of the port. It is a concrete coffin with walls 20 feet high, reinforced with steel rebar, and topped with razor wire that is not just sharp, but electrified with 10,000 volts of current. It is the one place in the entire facility where there is no way out but the way you came in. And I was about to close that door forever. I watched the monitor with unblinking eyes. The heavy box truck lumbered into the center of the enclosure, its tires splashing through deep puddles of oily water. The black sedan followed close behind, eager, hungry, like a scavenger bird waiting for scraps. They were confident. They thought they had bypassed security. They thought they were seconds away from lifting millions of dollars in untraceable cash. My finger hovered over the large red button on my console. It was a physical button, old-school industrial design, meant to be punched in an emergency. It controlled the hydraulic blast doors that were designed to seal off the area in case of a chemical spill. Tonight, the spill was human. I saw Tiana open the truck door. She stepped out into the rain, looking small and fragile against the towering concrete walls. The gangsters piled out of the sedan, their guns drawn, scanning the shadows. They were looking for threats. They were looking for guards. They did not look up. They did not realize that the threat wasn't a person with a badge. It was the architecture itself. I waited until the last man was clear of the vehicles. I waited until they were fully committed to the center of the trap. "Now," I whispered. I slammed my hand down on the red button. The sound was apocalyptic. It wasn't a click or a beep. It was the roar of pressurized hydraulics releasing tons of steel. Boom! Behind the black sedan, a massive steel shutter, 6 inches thick, dropped from the overhead gantry. It hit the concrete floor with a force that shook the entire observation tower. The ground trembled. The sound echoed off the metal walls of the enclosure, magnifying into a deafening crash that drowned out the storm. On the monitor, I saw the men jump. They spun around, weapons raised, firing blindly at the steel wall that had just cut off their retreat. Sparks flew as bullets ricocheted harmlessly off the reinforced metal. They scrambled back to their cars, but there was nowhere to go. They were sealed in a box. I reached for the lighting controls. Until now, the kill box had been lit only by the headlights of their cars. I flipped the master switch. Snap. 4 high-intensity halogen floodlights, mounted on the corners of the walls, blazed to life instantly. The sudden brightness was blinding. It washed out the night vision camera for a second before the auto-adjust kicked in. When the image cleared, I saw them. They were shielding their eyes, stumbling back, exposed like cockroaches when the kitchen light turns on. Tiana was crouching by the truck's tire, her hands over her ears, screaming. The men were shouting, running in circles, realizing that the electric fence was humming with lethal power. I picked up the earbuds from the desk. I hadn't crushed them yet. I needed to deliver one last message. I put the right one in my ear. The sound of panic was deafening. Braden was screaming on the other end. "Darius, what is that noise? What happened?" "The GPS signal just dropped. Where are they?" I leaned into the microphone. My voice was calm. It was the voice of a man who had nothing left to lose. "They are safe, Braden," I said. "They are in the safest place on Earth." "What are you talking about? Open the gate! Open the goddamn gate, Darius!" "No," I said. "That gate stays closed until the federal agents get here, and they are about 2 minutes away." There was a silence on the line, a silence of absolute, crushing realization. He knew. He finally understood that the old man he thought was a fool had been playing him from the very first move. You set me up," Braden whispered. "You set your own daughter up." "I saved my daughter," I corrected him. "I put her in a cage so you couldn't throw her to the wolves. She is going to prison, Braden, but she is going to be alive." I paused, letting the weight of the moment sink in. "Oh, and Braden?" "What?" he sobbed. "Happy late birthday, son-in-law. Your present is the FBI." I heard a sound in the background on his end. It was a loud crash, the sound of a door being kicked in. Then, voices. "Shout of federal agents! Get on the ground!" I heard Braden scream as he was tackled. I heard the phone hit the floor, and then I heard the click of handcuffs. I took the earbud out of my ear and dropped it onto the floor. I didn't crush it this time. I didn't need to. The connection was broken. The link was severed. I looked down at the kill box. Blue and red lights were flashing against the outer walls now. The cavalry had arrived. I saw the SWAT team moving into position on the catwalks above the enclosure, their rifles trained on the men below. I sank into my chair. My hands started to shake. The adrenaline was leaving my body, replaced by a cold, hollow exhaustion. I had won. I had taken down the bad guys. I had stopped the Russians. But as I watched my daughter down there, huddled in the mud, surrounded by men with guns, I didn't feel like a winner. I felt like a father who had just cut off his own arm to save his heart. I keyed the mic for the PA system that broadcasted into the enclosure. My voice boomed out over the rain, amplified and distorted, God speaking from the heavens. "Drop your weapons," I commanded. "It is over." One by one, the guns clattered to the concrete. It was over, and the long nightmare of the aftermath was just beginning. The floodlights hummed with a voltage that sounded like angry hornets. Below me, the kill box was no longer a shadow-filled trap. It was a stage, a brightly lit theater of consequences, where the final act of my tragedy was playing out in high definition. I watched through the rain-streaked glass of the observation tower. My hands were pressed against the cold pane. I wanted to break the glass. I wanted to jump down there and fight off the armed men swarming my daughter. But I stood still. I stood like a statue carved from grief, because I knew that every second of this nightmare was necessary. The doors of the empty blue container were wide open, gaping like a hungry mouth. Tiana was standing in front of it, paralyzed. The light reflected off the wet pavement, blinding her. She raised her hand to shield her eyes, squinting into the glare. She looked confused. She looked like a child who had woken up in the middle of a bad dream. Then the sound came. It wasn't the sound of cargo moving. It was the synchronized stomp of heavy boots hitting concrete. From the catwalks above the enclosure, black ropes dropped. Men in tactical gear slid down with the precision of spiders. They hit the ground running, their weapons raised, the laser sights cutting through the rain like red needles. "Federal agents, get on the ground!" The voice boomed over the loudspeakers, amplified and distorted. It was a voice that brokered no argument. The men from the black sedan knew the drill. They were career criminals. They saw the red dots on their chests. They saw the SWAT shields advancing from the shadows. They dropped their guns. They went to their knees, their hands laced behind their heads. They knew the game was up. But Tiana did not know the game. She had never seen the barrel of an assault rifle pointed at her chest. She spun around looking for an exit. She looked back at the truck. She looked up at the tower. "Daddy!" she screamed. The sound of her voice tore through the heavy glass. It tore through my chest. It was the same word she used to cry out when she had a nightmare as a toddler, but I could not wake her up from this one. "Get down! Now!" A federal agent in full body armor rushed toward her. He didn't see my daughter. He didn't see a scared woman in a trench coat. He saw a suspect. He saw a potential threat near a vehicle that might be rigged with explosives. He hit her with a tackle that sent her flying into the mud. I flinched. My body jerked forward as if I had taken the hit myself. I saw her face splash into the dirty, oily water of the shipping yard. I saw the agent press his knee into the small of her back. I saw him grab her wrists, the same wrists that were already bruised by her husband, and wrench them behind her back. "Please!" she shrieked. Her voice was shrill, hysterical. "I didn't do anything. Help me! Daddy, help me!" I watched the agent slap the metal cuffs onto her. Click, click. The sound echoed in my mind louder than the storm. Those were the sounds of her freedom ending. But they were also the sounds of her safety beginning. I felt a hot, wet track run down my cheek. Then another. I was crying. I was a 72-year-old man standing in a control tower weeping openly while 50 men below executed my orders. Hutch was standing next to me. He didn't say a word. He didn't try to comfort me. He knew that any words of comfort would be a lie. He just watched the monitor, ensuring the procedure was followed, ensuring they didn't hurt her more than they had to. "Look at the sedan," Hutch whispered, pointing to a screen. I forced my eyes away from Tiana for a second. The agents were pulling the men out of the black car. They were shouting orders in Russian. The men were shouting back. "Volkov's lieutenants," Hutch said. "We got the heavy hitters. D. Braden wasn't lying. These guys are the real deal. If Tiana had walked away from here tonight with no money, they would have put her in a trunk and she would have never been seen again." I looked back at my daughter. The agent was pulling her to her feet. She was covered in mud. Her expensive coat was ruined. Her hair was plastered to her face. She was sobbing, her shoulders shaking violently. She looked up. She couldn't see me. The floodlights were blinding her. To her, the tower was just a black monolith against the sky. But she looked right at the window where I stood. She knew I was there. She knew I was watching. "Daddy!" she screamed again. "Why? Why did you do this?" I placed my hand on the glass right over where her face was in the distance. "I did it because I love you," I whispered to the empty room. "I did it because prison has guards. Prison has walls. Prison keeps the monsters out." I watched them march her toward the armored van. She stumbled. The agent held her up, not gently, but firmly. They were processing her. She was a number now. Case number 409. Suspect number 2. As they pushed her into the back of the van, she fought them. She kicked out her legs. She was terrified. She thought her life was over. She didn't understand that I had just bought her a second chance. It was a painful, ugly chance, wrapped in barbed wire, but it was a chance. The heavy doors of the van slammed shut. The finality of that sound settled into my bones. She was gone. My little girl was gone. The radio on the console crackled to life. "Target secured. All suspects in custody. We are clear." I picked up the mic. My hand was shaking so bad I almost dropped it. "Copy that," I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to a stranger, a ghost. I looked down at the kill box one last time. The agents were sweeping the area, collecting the discarded weapons, photographing the empty container. The stage was being cleared. The play was over. I sank into the chair behind me. The adrenaline that had sustained me for 3 days drained away, leaving behind a hollow, aching void. I felt old, older than I had ever felt. "You did the right thing," D. Hutch said softly, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I know," I said, staring at the rain pounding against the glass. But knowing it didn't stop the pain, knowing it didn't stop the sound of her scream from echoing in my head. I had saved her from the Russians. I had saved her from her husband. But I had lost her. She would hate me for this. She would sit in a cell tonight and curse my name. She would think I had betrayed her, and maybe I had, but I would rather have her hate me and be alive than love me and be dead. I reached for my coffee mug. It was cold. Everything felt cold. "Let's go, Hutch," I said, standing up. "We have a statement to give, and then I have a son-in-law to testify against." I walked out of the tower, leaving the lights of the kill box burning below. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The image of my daughter in the mud was burned into my retinas forever. It was the price of admission for her survival, and it was a price I would pay every single night for the rest of my life. 5 miles away in the manicured silence of the suburbs, another door was being kicked in. I was not there to see it, but I read the police report and I listened to the audio logs from the surveillance team so many times that I can close my eyes and watch it play out like a movie reel in my mind. While my daughter was tasting mud and regret on the floor of a shipping container, the man who put her there was running for his life in his own house. Braden had ripped the headset off his head the second I delivered my final line. The silence in his home office must have been deafening. For months, he had sat in that ergonomic leather chair, sipping expensive scotch and playing God with our lives. He had felt untouchable. He had felt like a puppet master, pulling the strings of a senile old man and a terrified wife. But in one heartbeat, the strings had been cut, and the puppet master was left standing alone in the dark. He did not call a lawyer. He did not call his wife to see if she was okay. That is the thing about men like Braden. When the ship starts to sink, they do not look for lifeboats for the passengers. They look for a way to plug the hole, even if it means using bodies to do it. He scrambled out of his chair, knocking over his glass of whiskey. The amber liquid soaked into the Persian rug, leaving a stain that would never come out. He ran into the hallway, his footsteps heavy and frantic on the hardwood floors. He was heading for the basement. That was where the server room was. That was where the digital heart of his operation beat in the darkness. He knew that the server held everything. It held the encrypted chat logs with the Russian mobsters. It held the GPS tracking data. And most damning of all, it held the terabytes of audio recordings from the earbuds. Every conversation I had, every lie I had fed him, every threat he had made to Tiana. It was all there, stored in high definition. It was a digital confession written in his own voice. He burst into the basement, tearing his expensive suit jacket on the doorframe. The server room was cool and hummed with the sound of cooling fans. Blue lights blinked rhythmically on the black towers of hard drives. To him, those lights must have looked like police sirens. He tried to type in the command to wipe the drives. His fingers were shaking so badly, he kept hitting the wrong keys. Delete all. Confirm. Access denied. He tried again. Sweat was pouring down his face, stinging his eyes. Format drive C. Confirm. System lock initiated. He screamed, a primal sound of frustration and terror. He didn't know that Hutch had already locked him out. He didn't know that we had seized control of his system 10 minutes ago. He was typing commands into a dead keyboard. Realizing that the software wouldn't save him, he turned to violence. He grabbed a heavy metal golf club from the corner of the room, a 9-iron, one of the clubs he used to brag about at the country club while spending money he didn't have. He swung it with all his might. Crack! The metal head of the club smashed into the server tower. Plastic shattered, metal bent. Sparks flew out, showering him in hot debris. He swung again and again, screaming with every blow. He wanted to kill the machine. He wanted to murder the evidence. Smash, smash, smash. He thought if he destroyed the physical drive, the truth would disappear. He was a finance guy, not a tech guy. He didn't understand the cloud. He didn't understand remote backups. He didn't understand that every time he swung that club, he was just adding another charge to his rap sheet. Destruction of evidence, obstruction of justice. Upstairs, the front door exploded inward. The battering ram hit the oak door with enough force to splinter the frame. The sound was like a bomb going off. "Federal agents! Warrant!" The shout echoed down the stairwell. Braden froze. He stood there in the flickering light of the dying server, panting heavily, the bent golf club still in his hand. He looked around the room like a trapped animal. There was no back exit. There was no window. He had built himself a fortress, and now it was a dungeon. He dropped the club. It clattered on the concrete floor. He backed into the corner of the room, trying to make himself small. The man who had threatened to kill my daughter, the man who had sold out his country for a payout, was now cowering behind a stack of cardboard boxes. Boots thundered down the stairs. The beam of tactical flashlights cut through the gloom, sweeping across the room until they landed on him. "Hands! Let me see your hands!" Braden raised his trembling hands. They were cut and bleeding from the server debris. Dust covered his Italian suit. He looked pathetic. "Don't shoot," he whimpered. "Please don't shoot. I am a businessman. This is a misunderstanding." The lead agent stepped forward. He didn't lower his weapon. He looked at the smashed server rack, smoking and sparking in the center of the room. Then he looked at Braden. "You have the right to remain silent," the agent said, his voice dripping with contempt. "But I think we have heard enough from you already." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a digital recorder. He pressed play. From the tiny speaker, Braden's own voice filled the room. It was the recording from 2 days ago, the one where he ordered Tiana to go to the port. "You will go, or you can explain to our friends from Eastern Europe why they are not getting their money. Do you want to be the collateral, Tiana? Braden's face went white. He slumped against the wall as if his bones had turned to water. He realized then that the destruction of the server had been pointless. We had it all. We had always had it. The agent clicked the recorder off. That sounds like a confession to me, Mr. King. Conspiracy to commit grand larceny, extortion, domestic terrorism, and looking at this mess, trafficking in stolen federal property. 2 agents moved in. They grabbed Braden's arms and spun him around. They were not gentle. They slammed him against the wall, kicking his legs apart. The handcuffs clicked shut. "I am not the boss," Braden stammered, trying to sell out anyone he could to save his own skin. "It was the Russians. They forced me. They made me do it. Save it for the judge," the agent said, pulling him toward the stairs. They dragged him up from the basement, out of the darkness he had created. As they walked him out the front door, past the neighbors who had gathered on their lawns to watch the spectacle, Braden looked at the camera of a local news crew that had just arrived. He looked broken. He looked small. I saw that footage later that night on the news. I sat in my armchair, nursing a cold cup of coffee, and I watched the man who tried to destroy my family get shoved into the back of a squad car. He looked straight into the camera lens, and for a second, I felt like he was looking at me. There was no hate in his eyes anymore, just fear. Pure, empty fear. He had wanted to be a big shot. He had wanted to play in the major leagues. Well, he had finally made it. He was now the star of a federal investigation that would span 3 continents. I turned off the TV. The house was quiet. The black sedan was gone. The threat was neutralized. But the victory tasted like ash, because I knew that while Braden was sitting in a holding cell, wondering where it all went wrong, my daughter was sitting in a cell just a few miles away, asking the exact same question. He had destroyed the server, but he couldn't destroy the truth. And the truth was that he had taken everything from us. The money, the trust, the years. All that was left was the debris, and now it was my job to start sweeping it up. The visiting room at the correctional facility smelled of industrial bleach and stale sweat. It was a smell that stripped away dignity the moment you walked through the heavy steel doors. I sat on a round metal stool that was bolted to the floor. My hands rested on the cold stainless steel shelf in front of the reinforced glass partition. It had been 30 days. 30 days since the floodlights. 30 days since the scream. I checked my watch. The second hand swept past the 12. The door on the other side of the glass buzzed open. Tiana walked in. She was wearing an orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big for her. Her hair, usually dyed and styled to perfection, was pulled back in a messy knot, revealing the dark roots. She looked tired. She looked thin. But what struck me most was the anger in her eyes. It was a cold, hard hatred that she directed straight at me. She sat down. She did not pick up the black phone receiver on the wall. She just stared at me. Her lips were pressed into a thin, white line. I picked up my phone. I waited. Finally, slowly, she reached out and put the receiver to her ear. "You have some nerve coming here," she whispered. Her voice was tinny through the speaker, flattened by the cheap electronics. "I came to see how you were holding up," I said. "How am I holding up?" She let out a bitter, jagged laugh. "I am in prison, Dad. I am in a cage. Because of you. You set me up. You made me believe we were going to be free, and then you slammed the door on me. I did not flinch. I expected this. I did not set you up, Tiana," I said calmly. "I intercepted you. There is a difference." She leaned forward, her breath fogging the glass. "Braden was right about you," she hissed. "You are a jealous, bitter old man. You couldn't stand to see us happy. You couldn't stand that I chose him over you." "Happy?" I asked. I reached into the manila envelope I had brought with me. "Is that what you call it? Happy?" I pulled out a document. It was thick, stapled at the top. I pressed the first page against the glass so she could read it. "What is that?" she asked, squinting. "Divorce papers," I said. "I had my lawyer draw them up. All you have to do is sign." She scoffed, leaning back. "I am not divorcing my husband. Braden loves me. We are going to fight this. His lawyer said we can appeal." "Braden doesn't have a lawyer, Tiana," I said. "Braden has a public defender because all his assets were frozen. And he isn't fighting for you. He is cutting a deal. He offered to testify against you yesterday. He told the feds that you were the mastermind. He said you forced him to contact the Russians." "Liar," she spat. "He wouldn't do that." I pulled out the next item from the envelope. It was a photograph. A high-resolution surveillance photo taken by a private investigator 3 weeks before the arrest. It showed Braden sitting at a cafe. He was laughing. His hand was resting on the knee of a woman, a young, blonde woman. She was wearing a diamond bracelet. Tiana stared at the photo. Her eyes widened. "Recognize that bracelet?" I asked. "It looks a lot like the one you pawned last year to help him make payroll." I pulled out another photo. This one showed Braden and the woman entering a luxury hotel. "He wasn't investing your money, Tiana," I said, my voice low and relentless. "He was spending it. He was spending your inheritance, your savings, and your dignity on her. While you were begging your father for a loan, he was buying her champagne." Tiana's hand trembled. She touched the glass, tracing the face of the husband she thought she knew. "No," she whispered. "It is not true." "It is true," I said. "And here is the rest of it." I pulled out the final piece of paper. It was a printout from an encrypted chat log, the one Hutch had decoded. "Read the timestamp," I commanded. "This is from the night he sent you to the warehouse." She read it. I saw her lips move. "The girl is driving the truck. If the cops show up, she is the fall guy. I will be at the safe house. Just make sure I get the money. She is the fall guy." Tiana dropped the phone. It swung on its metal cord, banging against the wall. She covered her mouth with both hands. Her shoulders began to shake. The anger was gone, replaced by a crushing, suffocating grief. She realized that the man she had betrayed her father for had sold her out for spare change. She picked up the phone again. Her face was wet with tears. "Why?" she choked out. "Why didn't you tell me this before? Why did you let the police take me?" "Because you wouldn't have listened," I said. "You were under his spell. You would have warned him. And if you had warned him, he would have run." I leaned closer to the glass. This was the moment. The truth. And if he had run, Tiana, the Russians would have found him. And they would have found you. I looked deep into her eyes. "You think I put you in here to punish you?" I asked. "I put you in here to save your life." She blinked, confused. "Volkov," I said. "The man Braden owed money to. He doesn't file lawsuits. He sends cleaners. If you were on the street right now, with that debt unpaid, you would be dead. They would have come for you just to send a message." I gestured to the concrete walls around us. "These walls are ugly, baby girl. I know that. But they are thick. The Russians cannot get to you in here. The Aryan Brotherhood cannot get to you in here. You are a federal inmate. You are property of the United States government. You are safe." I watched the realization wash over her. It was slow, painful, like a bone resetting. 2 years, I said. "With the plea deal I arranged, you will do 2 years, maybe 18 months with good behavior. By the time you get out, the Russians will have moved on. Braden will be buried under 20 years of RICO charges. You will be free." She looked at me. Really looked at me. She saw the lines on my face. She saw the exhaustion. She saw the love that was fierce enough to hurt her in order to heal her. "You did this for me?" she whispered. "I did it because I am your father," I said, my voice cracking for the first time. "And a father's job isn't to be your friend. It is to be your shield, even if you hate the shield." Tiana pressed her forehead against the glass. She closed her eyes. The tears flowed freely now, washing away the makeup, the pretense, the lies. "I don't hate you, Daddy," she sobbed. "I am sorry. I am so sorry." I pressed my hand against the glass, matching hers. "I know," I said. "Sign the papers, Tiana. Be done with him." She nodded. She picked up the pen that was chained to the desk. She signed the divorce papers with a shaky hand. She pushed them back through the slot. I took them. I put them in the envelope. "I will see you next week," I said. "I will bring money for the commissary. I will bring you books." She looked up, her eyes red but clear. "Daddy?" "Yeah?" "Bring the earbuds," she said, a small, sad smile touching her lips. "The ones you crushed. I want to keep them, to remind me." I smiled back. It was a tired smile, but it was real. "I threw them away, baby girl," I said. "We don't need to listen to lies anymore." I hung up the phone. I walked out of the visiting room. The heavy steel door clanged shut behind me. It was a harsh sound, but to me, it sounded like a lock clicking into place, securing the most precious thing I had. She was a prisoner, but she was alive. And for the first time in years, she was mine again. The sun was setting over Baltimore, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and burnt orange. It was the kind of evening that usually signaled the end of a long shift at the port, but for me, it signaled the beginning of a new kind of life. I sat on the wooden swing on my front porch, the chains creaking softly with a rhythm that was familiar and comforting. On the small table beside me sat my old cassette player. It was a bulky, silver machine from the 90s, scratched and dented from years of use in the break room. I pressed the play button. The mechanical click was loud and satisfying. The tape hissed for a second, a sound of analog warmth, before the trumpet of Miles Davis cut through the evening air. It wasn't perfect audio. There was static. There was a wobble in the pitch, but it was honest. It was music that you could touch, music that had weight. In my hand, I held the sleek white charging case of the wireless earbuds. Tiana had asked for them in prison, but I had lied to her when I said I had already thrown them away. I had kept them for a few days staring at them, trying to understand how something so small could cause so much destruction. They were a marvel of engineering. They could connect to satellites. They could stream data across the ocean. They could pick up a whisper from across the room. But they were cold. They were tools of a world that had forgotten the value of privacy. They were the reason my daughter was wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of a summer dress. I looked at the blue light pulsing on the case. It was searching for a connection. It was hungry for data. "I am done feeding you," I whispered. I stood up and walked over to the galvanized metal trash can at the edge of the porch. I didn't just drop them in. I threw them with force. They hit the bottom of the empty can with a hollow plastic clatter. "Goodbye," I said. I sat back down just as a beat-up Ford pickup truck turned into my driveway. It wasn't a black sedan with tinted windows. It wasn't a luxury car paid for with stolen money. It was a truck that smelled of oil and hard work. Hutch stepped out. He was wearing his old army jacket and carrying a six-pack of cheap domestic beer. He didn't say anything as he walked up the steps. He just handed me a cold bottle and sat down on the railing. We cracked the bottles open in unison. The sound was sharp and clean. "How is she?" Hutch asked after a long sip. "She is surviving," I said, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. "She is angry at herself. She is sad, but she is safe. The nightmares are stopping." "And Braden?" Hutch asked. I took a swig of beer. It tasted bitter and cold, just the way I liked it. "Braden is singing like a bird," I said. "He gave up the Russians. He gave up the money launderers. He is going to spend the next 20 years looking over his shoulder in witness protection, if he is lucky. Or in a maximum security block if he is not. Either way, he is out of our lives." Hutch nodded. He looked out at the street. The neighborhood was quiet. No surveillance vans, no threats, just the sound of crickets and distant traffic. "We did good, Dee," Hutch said. "Yeah," I said, "we did." We sat there for a long time, listening to the jazz tape wind down. I thought about the journey of the last month. I thought about the technology that connects us. We carry the world in our pockets. We have instant access to everything. But in that constant noise, we lost the ability to hear what really matters. We lost the ability to hear the fear in our children's voices. We lost the ability to see the bruises hidden under gold bracelets. My daughter gave me those earbuds to silence me, to turn me into a passive observer of my own life. But instead, they woke me up. They reminded me that a father's job never ends. It just changes. Sometimes you have to be a provider. Sometimes you have to be a teacher. And sometimes you have to be the wall that stands between your child and the fire. I looked at the empty driveway. Tiana's car wasn't there. It would be 2 years before she pulled up that driveway again. But when she did, the door would be open. The music would be playing. And I would be right here, waiting. I am an old man now. My back hurts when it rains. My hands aren't as steady as they used to be, but my eyes are wide open. I learned that trust is precious, and vigilance is the only way to protect it. Hutch finished his beer and stood up. "Same time next week, Dee?" he asked. "You bet," I said. He walked back to his truck. I watched him drive away, a loyal friend in a world of variables. I turned off the cassette player. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was peaceful. It was the silence of a man who had cleaned his house, who had taken out the trash, and who was finally ready to rest. I closed my eyes and listened to the wind in the trees. No static, no interference, just the sound of a free life. We often think betrayal comes from enemies in the shadows, but the deepest cuts are made by those we hold close. I spent my life protecting shipments of gold and steel, Yet I failed to guard the most precious cargo, my family's integrity. My daughter's greed didn't just break the law, it shattered the sacred trust between father and child. But remember this, true love isn't about enabling someone's destruction. Sometimes, the only way to save the person you love is to stop them cold, even if it means watching them fall so they can finally learn how to stand. If this story touched you, or if you have ever had to make a hard choice to protect someone you love, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments what you would have done if you were in my shoes. Would you have opened the gate, or would you have closed it like I did? I read every single comment. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your family close.